Hey everybody, welcome to Square State. I'm your host, Michelle Jackson, bringing Coloradans to you one interview at a time. The mission of Square State is to help connect you with movers and shakers in the city of Denver and beyond, as well as connecting people with locally made products, goods, and services. I love to buy Colorado, but also to share the story of our awesome Square State. I often joke that Colorado is the love child between California and Texas because they would have a wild love affair like those two states. They'd never get married, but the result would be Colorado. Amy, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation to join you today, Michelle.
I felt like it was really important to have one of the best super connectors in town come to the podcast. And everyone, her full name is Amy Herman. She is an events professional and experiential marketing strategist here in the city of Denver. She works with creative technology spaces and does community activations for huge events like 500 to 150,000 people. Holy crap. And so I thought that I would connect with her because I met her at an event that I attend from time to time, the Freelancers Spark Union Denver, which is the weirdest name. I don't know why the name is confusing, but it's a great organization. And she talked about networking. And one of the goals of Square State is to help people connect. And when she dropped the following number in terms of the number of connections she has, I was like, I got to bring her on the show to talk about what it's like to meet people here in town. So she casually shares in this conversation, in this talk that she did, that she has about 25,000 people in her on her contacts list in some sort of way. So I was like, we need to get all into that. And before we go further into the interview, Amy Herman, if you could introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the the accolades from coming from you and hearing that you think that I'm a master networker, because I feel very similarly about you. But yeah, I'm a creative professional, and I really care about developing the capacity of individuals and organizations in order to develop a better world by design. I really believe that we belong to each other and that we are only as good as the insights that we receive from other people, and that those insights can be monumental ways of changing the way that we perceive ourselves, our communities, and our power, potential, and choice in life. So for me, what I do by day is organize events, manage egos casually. But what I'm really up to is about community organizing and organizing people in ways that make them come alive. So regarding the 25,000, which I just updated my CRM, and I'm approaching 28 now. But essentially, through my work as an event professional, I have the great fortune of working doors, and I remember names and faces. And a night can meet 100, 200 people in a very fast way. And it's casual, but I do my best to connect with people on a human level, even in those brief interactions. So I'm constantly shocked at how many people have met me and either through someone or through someone else have heard about me. But you know, my work in life is really about connecting people to each other in ways that would facilitate greater capacity.
I want to get into this whole, because any person listening to the episode so far and talking about 28,000 contacts. Let's dive into what that really means. Like, why is this a priority for you? You've touched on it, but how do you make that happen? How do you go into a space and meet people briefly and then somehow they become an actual contact? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you follow up with people? How do you engage? How does that work in a city like Denver? And you've lived in other cities. What has been your experience of being a creative professional carving your own lifestyle in the way that you want to design it, and then meeting people and making money. So what could you that question was a little all over the place, but could you talk about how you make this happen so that it makes sense and so that it valuable, these connections are valuable to the people that you actually meet and to you?
Absolutely. Admittedly, it is a huge amount of people, and I acknowledge that the wax and wane of reality means that there are some people that I don't speak to in a matter of, 3 or 4 years, but I'm constantly surprised at the serendipity of reunions for those people, whether it's I've seen people on the street that I haven't seen in 6-7 years, or even just the other day, someone reconnected with me. My friend Charles just moved to Denver, and we took a Swahili class in Indiana about 10 years ago, and he just popped right back in, and we picked up as if no time had lapsed. But essentially for me, I'm not a fan of small talk. I really, when I meet people for the first time, I assume that their day has been really boring.
I love it.
I think that most of the time people are nervous and perhaps a little too casual in their interactions with strangers. You're kind of nervous perhaps, or anxious about what the other person is thinking of you. And I just kind of strike the root and ask questions like, so what's lighting you up these days? Or tell me about something you read that inspired you recently. Or how have you been interacting in your community lately? I want to just really go for the relationship piece when I speak with people. It could also be a question about what motivates or inspires them. So what are you passionate about? I've actually had some people who, when I asked that question, really paused and said, I'm not really sure.
Wow.
And it was kind of a moment of disruption, psychological disruption for them. And some of them have actually returned to me and said, you know what, when you asked me that question, I don't know that I haven't checked in with myself enough to know what it is that I'm up to. And I really appreciated the nudge. So I think that's partially what binds me to people, is that I am actually genuinely curious about the ways in which people structure their lives and the meaning that we give to our everyday experiences. So I think that also helps me in remembering people, because I have something mnemonic and real and tangible to assign them in my mind. And it's not necessarily like I box them in, but it's a good starting place to really see the worldview unfold and the weave of connections that people make to develop their world. So the other piece of this is I am admittedly an extrovert, but I'm not shy, but I do need my downtime. And so I think events, again, allowed me to has provided me a structure to do some intense networking. So I can just sit down at a table and be handling money and still be able to speak with people while I'm doing it, and ask a couple questions. And therefore, in a matter of 6 hours, I can meet 100 people in rapid succession. And so you often don't think about lines in this, like lines to go into a venue, as a place of strategic connection. But for me, I think it's actually offered me this opportunity in a way that I could not have structured on my own, to meet just absolutely enormous amounts of people in very short order. The other piece of this is I am an early adopter of social media networking technologies. I was a 14-year-old on IRC and ICQ. For some of you 90s kids, that's pre-AOL Instant Messenger. And so I have always been drawn to the ability to communicate with other people in as many ways as possible, whether it be expressively first person or tech. And so I was even just kind of laughing to a friend yesterday. I sent over 150 text messages to people yesterday. It's Boulder Startup Week.
Oh, okay.
It's Boulder Startup Week. And I've been thinking about people I would like to see, and following up with people as I'm planning for my next venture And so I've got that blackberry thumb arthritis on lock, and it's just I've forever been texting. And so I am very comfortable with that medium and as a form of communication. And so between those kinds of experiences, I think that I am able to expand my circle, but also integrate my circle in a pretty meaningful way. Another random thing is that I have kind of a quiet social goal. And that is that there are people in my life who I think are just so extraordinary. And it is my highest form of pleasure to make introductions to people. The art of inviting people to events, the casual but meaningful act of making introductions between people and just going, I am so delighted to be a fly on the wall to just see this friendship evolve is for me the greatest joy. So I think it's just a combination of circumstance and personal power that allows me to manifest this kind of networking experience. But I'm only just getting started. And so that's the part that really excites me when I think about the potential, is how to, now that I've done these face-to-face interactions, how to scale that in a meaningful way that really creates what I think Denver could be, which is an equitable and just city. So I'm taking all advice and ideas about that for any listeners. So
I do want to talk about what it's like for you to network in Denver, or just what the connections are like in Denver. Do you find them to be on the surface? Do you find that it's easy to go from the casual connection to something deeper? Like, what has your experience been like as a human in this really dynamic, changing city?
Yeah, admittedly, I grew up in Texas and in the Midwest, so I do have an impulse already to just be very friendly.
Yes.
I don't think that hurt, but I have found that people are instantly overjoyed to share about themselves in this area. And to be frank, I think that there's just a vibe to this place that it feels like a big neighborhood at times.
Yes.
And so people have, I think, a kind of welcoming element of their person. I mean, there's a welcoming element to living here, where people are going, well, you might be new, you might be old, but I just want to meet you, because there's something to a city that doesn't have a solid urban identity. Or someone recently mentioned that Lisa Gagaudas from the Denver Arts and Venues mentioned that Denver is in a teenage state as a city, and I really liked that image for what it elicits from both an energetic perspective as well as kind of an intergenerational concept. Because I think that this is a place that has is taking there are people in this place that are taking a lot of risks.
Right.
And there's a lot of youthful energy here as well in the development of a city. And that's not to say that Denver doesn't have an identity, but I think that it's been siloed in neighborhoods for a long time. And with an influx of, I think once you work the numbers out of the people who are coming and going in and out of this state, this is a state that has about 50,000 people coming in every year. And the majority of those people are going to urban centers like Denver. So when you think about that, there's this influx of people who are already have this adventurous exploration impulse. And so I think that those personality traits mixed with just this being a place of great transition, people are really open when you ask them pointed questions about who they are and what they identify with, that they're willing to answer.
How has it helped your business? You develop events, and so how has connecting with all these people and just being open to meeting new people helped you grow your business?
I think the beauty of the work that I do is that I'm really open to creative ideas, and I have the great privilege of getting to work with people who are as eager as I am to manifest community. So I'm fortunate that, I guess, the mixture of the interaction and the impression that I leave builds a lot of trust between myself and other people. I end up meeting people maybe 2 or 3 times. And if they have the means to produce an event, they hire me. And I think the other piece is that I do follow up. We forget that the little business cards that we shove in our pocket are actually just a token of a person, a person's identity, a person's reality. And so it's really important, even in just, even if it's been 2 months and you've had this business card that's been sitting on your desk, it's okay to just say, hey, I know we met at this place and it's been a minute, but I'm going to this event and you're welcome to join. I think that's another thing too. I don't substitute emails for in-person. I think that the faster that I'm able to bring a relationship into an in real life experience, the more likely we are to have a stronger connection. So that would be another tip that I have, is think of those those micro interactions as having great potential to be much more. And suddenly you can build pretty sizable, reliable network.
You work for yourself. Actually, while you were talking about bringing relationships into, currently with social media, I find that people have a hard time transitioning relationships that they've made online, offline. Like, they don't get that they should. And I'm not talking about some random person who randomly DMs you and you have no idea the context of how they connected with you. I'm talking about, for example, I'm a personal finance blogger and podcaster, and I belong to the community that supports that. And then we have a conference and I attend the conference and those kinds of things. So what would you say to a person who is an entrepreneur, they're doing their thing, and they're having a hard time meeting people in real life, if you will, about how to transition those online relationships to offline and how to do it safely?
Mm-hmm. Another strategy I have is I try to have about 10, 15-minute phone calls a week. And
really? Wait, really?
Yeah. Those kinds of micro interactions, if you can't meet in person, at least you're getting a taste of somebody's, the manner in which they speak, the way they think. You get a taste of what it is that makes that person tick. I mean, I have a problem speaking over people, so sometimes a phone conversation is a really good way for me to slow down. Even if you've met somebody online, that's just an avatar. That's just a meme. You still need to get to the heart of the matter. And so there are levels of proximity in relating. And so if you're able to bridge that divide and just be really willing to take a risk and be a bit more open, 99% of the time, the win. And maybe not in the way that you expect it.
You mentioned being an extrovert, and I'm an extrovert and I have a lot of extroverted friends. I also, of course, have introverted friends and the people in between. And one of the things you mentioned earlier in the conversation was the fact that even though you're an extrovert, sometimes you have to rest. And I wanted to talk about that because I think a lot of people perceive extroverts as always being on and feeding from the energy of the people that they're meeting. Could you talk about just allowing yourself to rest and re-energize so that you're able to better connect with others?
Mm-hmm. I am a person that loves to be outdoors. Tree bathing. It's so nice.
Like you are now.
I am in fact outside in front of my house, barefoot in the grass. We've had the great fortune of having incredible thunderstorms here recently in Colorado. And I am just swimming in what feels like bath water. The air feels like bath water.
It is very humid right now.
So it's about cultivating space for just being. I know I identify as being a social leader, and a lot of the work that I do is about doing for others, doing for community, organizing, all of that. But it's taken me a while to actually sink into my own skin and realize that my power, potential, and choice are actually reflected in the way that I take care of myself. I spent years trying to figure out how to burn the candle at both ends. And as I'm now in my 30s, I just don't have the energy to do all of that. I'm nervous that my cortisol levels are going to drop when I'm going to have adrenal fatigue because of the cortisol levels that have fluctuated in my life from doing high adrenaline activities. When you're called to do production work, you're on. Mm-hmm. However, I think yoga, hiking, even things like crafts, and any kind of form of tactile intuition, it allows your brain to reset, and it allows a different part of your brain to get active. Meditation is another one. I think any of these opportunities are ways to really drop back in to the embodied part of living, which is not about, I'm a fan of servant leadership, but I'm also a fan of just general embodied care for oneself. So it's little things that I think really matter. And as a woman, another piece of this for me is actually taking a little bit more, slowing down on some of the beautification elements of my life. I have a pretty solid beauty routine that actually grounds me in a way that I can't really describe yet. But yeah, it's those little things that actually allow you to take some time for yourself.
You are also involved in some leadership roles in Boulder. And I wanted to talk about why you've chosen to do that. I get that it's not that far away, but I grew up in Boulder and Denver, and they are very different communities. What's it like to be involved in these two very different spaces, and where's the differences and where's the commonalities?
Yeah, so truth be told, I just moved to Denver in December, but I've been living in the region for almost 5 years. I have a love affair with cities. I really do. I like the energy of cities, but I've also spent a significant amount of time in smaller towns and rural areas. And so for me, Boulder is a place that it definitely taps into the more, the quieter aspects of living that I enjoy. I am involved with the Boulder County Leadership Fellows. It is a group that's sponsored by both the Boulder Chamber and the Community Foundation. And it's one of the most intersectional groups of young, vibrant leaders that I have been involved with, which is partially why I committed to that program. I was invited to join about a month before I had elected to leave Boulder. And I thought about it, am I a fraud? Here I go. I know I'm leaving this place for a number of different reasons. One of them being the lack of equity in that county. At the very least, I wanted to participate because I think that there's some deep social listening that I needed to do that I had, for whatever reason, been unable to do while I was living there. Mostly because Boulder is siloed. Boulder has a component to its livelihood that is about extreme venture capital and extreme sports and extreme healthy eating habits.
Yes.
And it's also a place that's deeply committed to sustainability.
Yes.
And so for whatever reason, I didn't feel complete in that place. And so I'm really glad that I chose to get involved in that group because it's opened my eyes to the reality of people who I've never met, whether it's Hispanic families in Longmont and the LGBTQ community in Boulder County and its growth in recent years, or the experiences of young entrepreneurs trying to take commercial real estate spaces and make them community driven. So I think that Boulder's challenges are deeply about bridging economic gap. If you read the Boulder County forecast, essentially there's a $50,000 gap between people who are working in the service industry and people who are in the tech industry. And it's significant. And there's a rift in the ways that people have access to both educational services as well as services like medical and healthcare that would benefit the capacity building in their lives. And so these are not issues to ignore. I would say a commonality is that, you know, both Boulder and Denver have a really significant conversation about the price of real estate. I don't think that is somehow a Colorado problem. I think it's a national problem. And I read a recent report in Market Watch that suggests that things like real estate and healthcare and childcare have quadrupled over the last 20 years, and while wages have been relatively stagnant in comparison. So I don't see those problems going away without some really deep, radical, I'll even say, changes in zoning laws and an understanding of proximity living and creating hubs of opportunities to utilize different forms of transportation to make our lives much more about relationship and first-person relationships in particular. So on the Denver end, of course, Denver also has Denver has rapid growth because of an influx of capital. And also we have a mayor who loves to give handouts to developers. And I think that we are not in a good place currently to create an equitable city, but I'm encouraged by this new crop of community organizers and entrepreneurs who have elected to pursue some work in the political sphere. And so I think that there are some opportunities within the fold of that community to see some really influential changes in the region. I can point to a couple projects that I think make Denver an outstanding place. Number one, I think that this is an area that has an incredible ecosystem of community gardens. And
I'm in one, actually. I love my community garden.
Exactly.
I love it.
I think that putting more attention to those space and energy in those spaces is of great value. Two, I think that Denver has the fact that there are people who are willing to take risks and build things like tiny home communities,
yes,
with or without the support of the city, speaks volumes about the power of people to just put their mind to something and pursue it. I also think that we're fortunate to live in a state that has a very strong cooperative and employee ownership movement, supported by legal structures like the Colorado Crowdfunding Act. I think that we have an opportunity in this state to develop businesses that actually provide shared opportunities for community wealth practices to flourish. And I'm heavily involved in those conversations. So yeah, that's sort of my take on some of the similarities, differences, opportunities, and challenges in both Boulder and in Denver. But truth be told, I'm very interested in sticking around in Denver because I am debating my own capacity to pursue a position in politics and considering running for an RTD board position within the next 2 years and working with mentors to really envision what a viable transportation system could look like in this region, given all of the influx of people and capital, and supported by advances in technological improvements, both on the energy front and in the transportation sphere.
One of the biggest, and it's a comment because it's something that pisses me off, one of the biggest issues with transportation that bothers me is it's not easy to go to the mountains if you don't have a car. If you don't have a car, it's very, very difficult to go to Breckenridge or any of those places that you would want to enjoy as a Coloradan. In fact, it feels like that's almost on purpose. And so seeing transportation moves towards busing and things like that, I've kept my eye on them because I'm endlessly fascinated by the fact that there are people who live in the city and they've never been to the mountains. Like, if I told people that outside of Colorado, they would never believe me. But to me, it's a wealth divide issue where maybe if you don't, like, it's something that people don't think about or consider, and it's just wrong. But that's just a little bit of a rant, because I'll just keep going. But that's okay. I'm calming myself down. So for those people who would like to connect with you, or they might have a huge event that they want you to run, how can they contact you?
I'm very open. I would say the best method is actually to drop me an email. It's A as in apple, M as in man, Herman, and that's HERMAN @gmail.com. Happy to schedule 15-minute phone call. Complete strangers. I've people on this planet who who are currently strangers, who I've yet to meet, and they could be great friends. So I'm encouraged to expand my circle